My name is Matthew Marzinski. I'm a program manager at the Hive. And just to ground everybody in what the Hive is, this is our Microsoft's dedicated AV research and development laboratory that we use as our customer zero center. So it's the place, it's the nexus where everything comes together that's related to AV and digital online collaboration at Microsoft. Everything that we do at the Hive is deployed at Microsoft, but we also share what we're doing with our customers. We share best practices, and this series is a peek into all the work that we do. So we'll hear from the rest of my team at the Hive here. We'll also hear from the team's PG, because obviously screens and displays are very much connected into the team's UI. But we're bringing you this session as a way of taking a peek into our work, what we have been working on, what we our points of view about where we are going with some of our technology. So I'm going to turn it back to Erica to kick the session off here about screens and displays.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So, when we think about the meeting space, next to audio, the visual source is one of the most important attributes that your end users, your customers are going to be interfacing with, right? And we've come a really long way over the past 20 years in AV IT when it comes to those visualization sources, right? From projection, rear projection, to the DLP screens, to LED, to LCD, to what we're doing today, right? So, when the Hive is working with our partners, with our customers, and thinking about the best scenario in a meeting room, that visualization source is one of the most important things that we're really looking at, right? Knowing that high quality video today is a must-have in conference rooms. So, Sam, with that, I really want to kind of kick it over to you to walk us through what the Hive is doing, what we're seeing, what we're doing with our partners, everything that has to do with the importance of displays in conference rooms today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erica. I will also take this time to pull in David Boyle, my partner in crime over at the Hive, our engineering lead. And we're super excited to talk about displays, projection. We have a lot of use cases that we deploy as customer zero within Microsoft. We have roughly Dave, at any given time, we're about 13,000 conference rooms online currently across our portfolio. We've got a snippet here of a few slides of just some of our spaces. We have displays, we have projection solutions deployed, and it's one of, I'd say it's definitely a top question that we get during Hive tours, customer engagements, even when we're talking with our own IT admins and sites within our campus around, how do we decide? What do we put a display in? Do we do projection? And so we're really excited to dive in and talk about some of the considerations that we have when we are designing our standards and our archetype designs for our rooms on campus. And before we get started, we're also going to ground a little bit into some of the terms that we're going to use. So really, we're going to do mostly a dive this morning or today on displays or panels. So these are our traditional displays, our typically 69. We're seeing new aspect ratios come out, but these are very traditional glass displays at the front of the room. On our campus, we will typically range from size of about 43 inches for some of our smallest rooms to 85 in a large, or even 98 now, as those are becoming a little bit more commercially available. It's exciting. In the past few years, we've seen the 21:9 aspect ratio be introduced, and we're leveraging those in some of our signature spaces as well. And then we've got projection. So, Dave, this is one of my favorite jokes, but 3 or 4 years ago, what were we doing to all of our projectors in most of our spaces across campus?
Tear them out.
Tearing them out.
Displays are where we're going.
I think every one of us as Microsoft employees have some story or another of walking into a conference room and seeing an exec standing on a table trying to get one of the old beasts of those lamp-based projectors turned on or functioning or set to the right input setting. The old projectors of, the lamp-based, low resolution, low brightness, they could heat the entire room up. Those days are pretty much gone with some of the new laser models that we're seeing today. We'll also pair some of our projection oftentimes with a screen. We also do a lot of displays where we're just shooting against a level 5 finished drywall, so we can dive in a little bit there as well. And then we're also, in some of our higher end rooms, we are also looking at video wall solutions, LED video wall panels. So we'll do a little bit of a case study on one of our projects that we did for our boardroom here at Microsoft. So that's a little bit of the topics we're going to dive into. We're excited to kind of go through some of the pros and cons, some of the design considerations in terms of construction considerations. There's definitely a cost element to when we're thinking through new construction versus retrofit scenarios. Also, Avixa standards. We work very closely with following a lot of the guidelines. I think it's been especially interesting in some of the new designs that our team's product has introduced that have forced us to rethink a little bit around what the Avixa standards are and screen sizes. When we think of the content area that's displayed on the screen, we now have so much data and so many attributes and artifacts on the screen. We've got shared content, we've got chat panels, we've got gallery views, we've got hand raise panels. That has forced us to rethink a little bit how we approach screen sizes. Spoiler alert, typically we'd like to go bigger when possible, but we'll dive in a little bit more details on that. And finally, I think, before we even kick off, I think it's really great. We've got one of our partners here at Microsoft that's going to give us a great overview of the team's canvas and the team's layout. And I think that's going to really help ground in terms of what we're lighting up at the front of room and why certain considerations in terms of single screens, dual screens, ultra wide aspect ratios, projection, just to kind of give you a sense of what that content looks like with teams displayed on the front room. So I will use that as a handoff to jump in and let us talk through some of the team's layouts.
Thanks, Sam. Perfect. So yeah, let's start with the meeting layout. So over the next few slides, the focus of this presentation is going to be around how different layouts from the meeting room perspective is going to show up on how your display is set up, whether it's a single display, dual display, 16:9 versus 21:9, as well as using different layouts itself. Let's get right into it. To start off, let's start with the front row layout. As Sam was showing different varieties of displays set up within the rooms, let's see how the front row layout looks up when it comes to the content itself. Here is the first reference in here. This is a 20:9 all the way up to 105 inches screen. This is the state-of-the-art display that we kind of set up in the signature conference room. It's like one display, wide display. And in terms of front row, it's pretty straightforward, as you can see from the images. When the content is shared versus when it's just an image of a speaker presenting within the conference room, when it's spotlit, significant amount of space is focused on the content, the main center portion, and the meeting metadata, which is basically the chat and the hand raise or the participant panel itself, is something that you as a end user or organizer of the event can fine tune where you should have chat show up within the screen versus where you should have hand raise showing up within the screen. And the second image is kind of a highlighting once the content presentation is completed, when it's more like a free flow one-to-one conversation or a fireside chat, when a presenter is speaking, how you can spotlight a specific presenter to show up widely for the conference room itself. Moving on to the next content layout. From the front row, same exact front row, but if you take that from a 21:9 to 16:9 display from the aspect ratio standpoint, here's what you get from the layout standpoint. This is on a screen all the way up to 80 inch. And as you can see, the main difference you can see is from the meeting metadata itself. As you can see in the previous slide, you had both metadata kind of sticking on the other side of the content itself, one on the left, one on the right. But when it comes to 16:9, it's specifically one metadata that you can basically highlight, either the chat or the hand raise. And the main important thing with the front row is having these videos of the presenter, videos of the attendees or the other participants at an eye gaze level, like exactly how it's featured in this images. And if you notice here, there is a unified background is also being applied as part of the front row, and that kind of aligns with the overall meeting tone itself. Yep, we can go to the next slide. And this covers same 16:9, but when the display is beyond 80 inches, when it's up to 85 or higher, that's where you can actually derive similar to what experience you saw from 21:9, where you can actually have both metadata side by side and you see the notifications, and you get additional capability of basically fine tuning or sizing the video feeds itself in the front row, where depending on the layout, depending on the distance from where or everyone else in the room are sitting, sometimes you would want those video feeds to show larger compared to small or medium. So that is something that you can always fine tune from the device config itself. Yep. We can go towards the next slide. And the same exact scenario, but in this scenario, it's dual display. Instead of a one wide state-of-the-art display, it's like two displays connected, and the MTR is being run in a dual display mode. As you can see, the same exact layout from the front row perspective, but here we have more real estate because the content is flowed over to the one of the screen, where we still have enough real estate space on the other screen. So any of the parts, any of the videos that you pin locally or you spotlight, that takes a significant space on the right on the other screen itself. And when you do focus on content, the content will be the predominant space. And this kind of this look and feel is similar to how you would see emulating a 21:9 on a wider just single display. That's exact layout we try to emulate here as well. Yep. Can go towards the next slide. And this is the controls you would get from the touch access panel itself. You as an organizer or basically the one who's running the event itself can fine tune and basically select which metadata should show where. When I say metadata, it's purely the raise hands and chat. And in future, when we add more capabilities in terms of showing up within the real estate, those will eventually flow here as well. Perfect. So we talked about the front row layout. The other layouts that many of our customers love to use are the gallery layouts and the together mode. Let's jump into that. Now from the gallery layout, there are two galleries we have. One is a standard gallery, which is 3x9 high fidelity videos on a single screen. In a single screen, in a single display scenario, that's the view you would get. Like when there is no content being shared, if it's just the videos of remote presenters or people from other rooms joining, we showcase 3x3 along with the chat panel on the right-hand side. And yep, let's go to the next slide. And if you compare that with the large gallery, which is basically similar to the gallery, but higher number of feeds, it provides up to 7x7, 49 video feeds. So far, these two gallery we have talked about, we are talking in terms of a single display configuration, just one display connected to the MTR. Now, let's take the same gallery views and let's take a look at how it would look at when we have dual display connected to the MTRs. Yep, we can switch to the next slide. Oh, yeah, before that, the gallery mode, the together mode as well. And in this scenario, there are very fewer videos that you're seeing. That's why the gallery mode is pretty magnified and just fewer videos showing there, but it can show up to 49 depending on the layout that you've selected for the together mode and the scene that you have put together, which accommodates the number of feeds that scene accommodates. And yeah, this is exactly the view from a single display. And finally, when you have two front of the room display connected to the Teams rooms, basically we basically smoothly flow across the two displays. Depending, we highlight that or we situate the video feeds depending on what is being shared and what's not being shared. For example, this image shows up there is no content being shared here, and it's purely the video feeds of other presenters. And in this case, it's purely a standard gallery. You can see how in Microsoft 3x, instead of 3x3 in a single display, you see total of 18 videos floated across the two displays automatically. And if you take the same scenario or setup, which is dual display, and look at the large gallery mode, we can see how it looks like in the next slide. So this is basically with the standard gallery with the content being shared within the meeting itself. Like how the significant difference is we are focusing content on one screen completely, whereas all the video feeds are kind of focused on the other dual screens, so that it's become the content becomes a predominant space. At the same time, you still have view of the other presenters for most recent active or the ones you have pinned, depending on what layout you're using. In this case, it's a standard gallery that is invoked, and that's why we are seeing 3x3 on the second display and the content PowerPoint Live or VBSS being shared on the left-hand side. And same exact view, the difference being instead of a standard gallery, we have a together mode that is invoked from the scene standpoint, and that's what it takes on the right-hand side. And that's basically automatically adjust. This is not something you need to take action on. The moment you invoke a together mode with the content being shared, we automatically did. I mean, since the MentPR knows it's on a dual display pattern or a mode, it automatically picks the space that is required. And finally, from the gallery perspective, we looked at how the front row can be controlled from an end user or organizer standpoint. Same ways with gallery as well. As you can see, there are two main controls that is there: content plus people, or if you want to focus on just people to display within that room, you can fine tune that as well. And also, of course, the chat metadata itself. It's completely optional whether to show it along with those screens or not, and you can fine tune and do it dynamically at any point in time. Perfect. So hopefully that kind of gives you an overview of different layouts and how it works within the MTRs when in a different setup. And yeah, that's basically the UI look and feel and how things will be seen on the rooms itself.
We are bringing in some of the partners and products that we use internally at Microsoft. So this is by all means not an inclusive list of supported devices that work great on Teams. We'll have a few callouts on some of the OEM partners that we work closely with. As part of the virtual tours as well, we'll showcase a few of the products that we've actually installed in rooms. Let's get started. So right off the bat with displays. We use a lot of Samsung displays on campus. They are part of our internal standards. We also have good partnerships with a number of other OEMs. We use LG, Sony displays as well across our room types. But here's a call out around Samsung. I think it's a good way to help ground some of the work that we're doing in terms of some of the factors and requirements that we think. Displays, when we're looking at Teams, they're one of the peripherals or one of the devices that are not certified. So there isn't a hard rule around technical requirements for what we think about displays in conference rooms. But there are some principles that internally at Microsoft we have adopted. So first, enterprise grade reliability is something that's important for us. So things like when you're looking at different display lines, keeping into account a lot of our conference rooms at Microsoft, they light up in the morning. 9 a.m. is typical, but it's not uncommon for a few folks or teams, depending on time zones, to come in earlier and or perhaps stay later. So we are taking into account that these displays are going to be on and functional for 8 to 10 hours a day, keeping that into account. That's one factor. The other factor that's also really important is just the manageability of those displays. In terms of we rely on having our MTRs control when a display wakes and goes to sleep. So all of our displays that we are deploying have wake on sync functionality capability. So that is relying exclusively on there being an HDMI signal being sent to the display, and the display will use that. If there's a signal being sent, the display will wake up. If the signal goes away when the MTR goes to sleep, the display will put itself to sleep. In previous generations of displays, we would have had extra components to manage wake and sync. One of our principles, one of our goals in our conference rooms are to reduce the complexity. So we do no longer, for our new standards, we will no longer rely on external devices for control. We rely exclusively on wake on sync. And on the flip side, we also get a lot of questions around other protocols, things like CEC. Now, CEC, in theory, works great. We have run into way too many instances where even if CEC is something like a 95% reliability, that's not quite good enough for us. Just like in my home, I've got maybe an Apple TV with a different setup in some rooms. I've got projector in one room, display in another. In the setup that has CEC, I don't think I've ever had a household that is more frustrated when Bluey doesn't light up because the Apple TV failed to wake my display, and then it takes about 15 minutes to figure out where the heck we put the remotes so we can manually get things back in sync. So within our enterprise solutions, we are not relying on protocols like CEC. It's purely wake on sync. So that's an important call out. The other thing too, as well, that when we're looking at some of the metrics and some of the displays are some technical details like nits, brightness for a room. We're not necessarily too, it's not a hard rule, but we are taking into account if a room will have a lot more ambient light. That's something we'll consider. And then also just in terms of longevity, right? If it's a brighter display, we might be able to run it at a lower capacity, and that could help extend some of the light, the lifetime of that display as well. Across our rooms at Microsoft, we do have everything we mentioned from 43 inches up to 85 is typical. We have started to experiment and look a little bit at the 98-inch panels as well. So that's most of the enterprise lines will support all the way from one end to the other. And then if we go to the next slide, I think we'll also touch on some of our other partners. So then when we're talking about displays, we will do a dive into some of our rooms that have a full LED video wall. So for example, in this room, in one of our boardrooms at Microsoft, this is a planar video wall solution. This specifically is one of their latest products around the this is the Direct Light Ultra Series LED video wall. And this is a really higher end solution that we love. This room is a really great experience when you walk into this room in terms of getting a very large display on the wall, super high brightness fidelity. It's a high resolution display. In terms of installation, these are individual panels that come up on the wall. A very quick installation process when we worked with the Planar team to get this installed. There's a lot of benefits as well to a room like this that I'm excited to dive into as we do a virtual tour of this room. A lot of questions come up around, hey, how do we think about 105, the 105 21.9 aspects at Microsoft? We love it. This is a really great experience. One of the considerations, there are definitely considerations when we're looking at these panels specifically. One, just very transparently, is cost. It's true that these displays are coming down in cost. Jupiter was one of the first OEMs to introduce this model line. I think in the past year alone, we've seen a lot of our other major OEM partners introduce their own 21.9 versions. Things, I think Aver, Samsung, LG, just to name a few, and that's really helping drive some of the, optimizations around supply chain, et cetera. And we are seeing costs come down, but it is still a premium product for us at Microsoft. So when we are looking at when we're able to install across our portfolio, these will tend to be perhaps an exec room, a higher end room, a customer facing room, or some kind of showcase experience. That's when we'll be able to spend a little bit extra money to get this display into the room. Again, it's a beautiful experience, and if we could do this in every room, a lot of our signature rooms, our small, medium conference rooms, I would, but we are just mindful around scalability challenges. There's also just, when we're looking at a pen of 105 display, we're also just being very mindful of just the sheer size of that display. That comes in a box, I think that's about 10 feet long. The display itself is about 8 feet long. I think Dave, was it in somewhere in Europe? I'll pull Dave back in because we pretty recently got pulled into an ITM call where they had ordered a Jupiter display and they realized that it would not fit in their elevator and it would not go through the stairwell. So some of the buildings, being mindful around the logistics of installation, and they ended up requiring, I think it was like a 4th or 5th floor installation where they ended up having to rent a crane and lining it up through a window on a top floor. So that is also another very important considerations to avoid unpleasant surprises and skyrocketing costs for your project. But again, I can't stress enough how beautiful of a display these 105 21.9 aspect ratios are and how great teams especially front row experience lights up. We have a few virtual tours for these rooms as well to showcase what this looks like. If you can see my browser here, I'm sharing my screen. We've got these really great virtual tours. So these are all rooms that we have deployed on Microsoft Campus. Part of them have been pilots. Some of them are fully scalable rooms that we'll deploy. So we'll just start off very quickly. This is a very traditional room. This should be very familiar to most people. As a spoiler from an earlier comment I made, and this is our small conference room, we love the simplicity of having just a single display on the front wall. This looks really great with a front row experience or just shared content if that's what your meeting purpose is. Typically in a room like this, we'll go anywhere from about 65 to about 85 inches. Again, we tend to bias towards 85 when we can, but also understand that especially at price points, that 75 inches is a really big sweet spot. So in a lot of our small rooms, our standard size will be about a 75-inch single display in this room. If it was a higher end room. So this is one of our signature room experiences. So we've got the beautiful gumdrop table. This is a really great hybrid experience. It's a particularly nice room here. This is an example. This is one of the Jupyter 21:9 aspect ratios. So this is that 105-inch aspect ratio. We are essentially going from edge to edge on that table. The table is, about 2 feet off the front wall. So it's still a very comfortable viewing angles. But, this is a room, taking into account there's a lot of bright lights, some open windows, so there's a lot of ambient light. So given all those considerations, a display front of room makes a lot of sense for a room like this for us. When we jump into slightly larger spaces, again, this is, when we get into the medium-sized rooms for us at Microsoft, that's probably about 12 to 16 chairs in that room. This is an example of an early pilot that we did where we actually brought in a 98-inch display. I love the 98-inch display. Again, I love having that large canvas on the front room to really bring a lot of the concepts from Teams to life in this space. I think one of the considerations and costs for us when we're doing a room install like this, however, is that is a large appliance in the front of the room. So when we're installing this, it works great when we're here, being very mindful of the logistics of getting this installed into your room. Those are real. These 98-inch displays come in giant boxes. They're heavy. It takes thought and planning to get that installed in the room. And then also, just because of the weight and the sheer size of it, we're also, we look at options for mounting options. So yes, you could open the wall and re-engineer the wall with, plywood backing, et cetera. That to us typically adds a lot of cost and expense and time to a room project. So here's an example where this is a heckler box where we're essentially mounting the display and then having an exoskeleton style mount that takes the weight off of the wall and pushes it down to the floor. And then going into larger rooms where we're talking about dual display option, that's where, as we get into these larger rooms, those dual displays make a lot of sense where you've got a little bit more width to the wall. So this is a beautiful, another signature style room where a dual 85-inch displays at the front of the wall. Again, we're mapping, we're taking into account the width of the table. Those are all important considerations. The last room that I'll focus here again and spend just a moment on is this LED video wall solution. And this is another again, beautiful solution. Because they come in panels, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of making this screen fit exactly to the specifications of your room. So this is approximately about a 12 to 13 foot wide display. We're not quite 21:9 aspect. Again, just given the panel sizes, I think we're roughly about 20:9 aspect ratio if we're being specific. But because of the way Teams is designed, that's as long as we're mapping the right resolution and aspect ratio, the Teams experience looks great on a screen of this size. And again, because of the high end nature, there are more considerable design considerations that we're putting into a space like this. It is a higher priced option, but again, in our executive and boardroom designs and solutions, these rooms make a lot of sense. So projection. So as Dave and I talked about earlier, about 3 or 4 years ago, and if we want to jump into the next slide right away, that'd be great. 3 or 4 years ago, we were really ripping out a lot of our old lamp-based projectors. There was just so much overhead in terms of managing, keeping bulbs installed correctly. These were not very bright displays. But I think what's been really encouraging and really awesome to see especially in the past few years, 1 or 2 years, where laser projection has really taken off. One of our key partners here, we've had a lot of workshops in the Hive with the Epson team. As they've refined some of their product lines, and there's a lot of the products that we're leveraging as part of our Microsoft standards. There's a lot of functionality, just like displays, in terms of requirements that we're driving when we're thinking of display. Again, similarly, in our previous generation of projectors, we would have extra complexity, extra components. We would have control boxes that would wake the display up and put the display to sleep. A lot of the new projector lines have that built in. So now it's really just, you could pretty much do a direct HDMI cable from your MTR compute to the projector. You don't need any extra control. They wake up when they're supposed to. With lasers, they're practically instant on at full brightness. You don't need the 15, 20 minutes for the bulbs to wake up and warm up. We're also just seeing much brighter displays. So, Epson here on their slide, they've called out 3,000 lumens. I don't even think we have a projector in our spec that starts below 6,000 or 7,000 lumens today. These are all high resolution projectors as well, where they're able to produce, even with a pixel shifting technology, there's still a 4K resolution that they can output. So we're really excited about what we're seeing from projection. When some of the considerations on displays, we're looking at, you've got a plan for a 98-inch package box, an 8-foot long box coming for a wide aspect display. With projection, you can just see, one of the huge benefits of it is just the logistics of shipping a projector is much, much simpler than a large display box. So those are all aspects that are really reintroducing us and thinking about the role that projectors have in our conference rooms, especially in rooms that we're looking at putting a very large canvas in the front. When we're looking at projection, the 21.9, we could easily deploy a 140-inch diagonal 21.9 aspect display. And again, with projection, that's a much easier thing to do than considering how much glass you would need with a traditional display. If we go to the next slide. One of the products as well that we've been working closely with Epson on and keeping tabs on, they've got a new ultra short throw model as well. I've got an ultra short throw projector in my living room that I installed a few years ago that gives me 120 inches. For whenever my kids watch Disney, that pretty much is all we're using it for these days. But it's still a really great picture. And this was one of the first. I wanted to just make a call out to this Epson, their 4KE extreme short throw model, where all of the enterprise features that we talked about, the wake on sync functionality, they've got custom EDID, the 21.9 aspect ratio natively out of the box. All of that works. We're leveraging these projectors today in rooms at Microsoft in our multi-purpose rooms where we need to display 140, 150 inches with an easy installation. We're able to drop in this ultra short throw or a model like this at the front of the room without having to worry about massive overhead installations. So there's a lot of really interesting use cases that these ultra short throw models are starting to introduce. So that's a great call out. The two lines that are found mostly throughout our Microsoft standards with Epson. So this is their PowerLight L77OU model, high resolution, high brightness. It's a 7,000 lumen projector. Again, all the enterprise features that we care about are built in. For our even more powerful rooms, on the next slide, we'll jump into the EB series, where if you're looking at high spaces, we've got a virtual tour for a room where we've got a 10,000 lumen projector as well. Again, as you're looking through the largest spaces where you're trying to push those 140-inch plus display sizes, making sure you're meeting some of the needs and you're setting up your space for success with the high lumen counts is really important for us. So a consideration with projection, we're able to display that 21.9 aspect in a room. Here's a great example of a traditional conference room with a nice big 21.9 aspect. One benefit I'll call out with that 21.9, as opposed to something like a dual display, like a 75 or 85-inch display in a room like this, one of the benefits would be, the layout. We're not creating such a wide canvas on the front of a room that you'd have otherwise the dual display. Some of the feedback we get with the dual display rooms, especially if you're sitting in maybe the front 2 or 3 seats, if you've got content on one side and participants on the other display, you're creating a really wide span of view. That left to right becomes really wide. it's not uncommon then if you're presenting a PowerPoint that's on one slide, that could be behind the head of that entire row of people where they've got kind of these uncomfortable viewing lines. That benefit that I see with projection, if you're able to deploy it in a room where it makes sense, this is a great example. There are no external windows in this room. The light control is great. The picture quality really pops. It looks really great in this room. When you've got that single canvas on the front of the room, you're sharing content, you've got front row lit up, your content is literally in the middle of the screen. So it's a really easy viewing angle for everyone in the room. That works great for these traditional conference rooms, but also signature rooms as well. One thing that we've noticed really well, a lot of the screens that we are deploying is that what we call ALR. So they're ambient light rejecting screens. And what that does is essentially, depending on the angle that your projector is throwing at, the screen is really optimized to make the projected image as bright as possible and then not reflect light that's coming from, say, directly overhead of the screen. We're sharing an example here of an ALR screen. This is one of our partners over at Daylight, Legrand Daylight company. They make these parallax screens, whether your projector is a traditional ceiling mounted projector or you're using an ultra short throw projector, there are different materials that will optimize for the projector location. And really, again, the number of times we've had people walk into one of our rooms and didn't even realize that it was a projection and they thought it was just a really big display. That's kind of a cool effect that we see.
One of the things that I wanted to kind of nudge you on is when customers have come to the Hive and seen both projection and displays, one of the things that we talk about is the total cost of ownership or the total cost of installation of displays versus screens, right? So you need to take into account, for example, that with a projection screen, you have a very low profile surface and you don't necessarily have to compensate for something sticking up out of the wall. Where for, at least in the United States, for ADA reasons, you need to build a credenza or you need to build a knee wall. And there's also structural considerations to take into account. If you're hanging a heavy display and you don't have the reinforcement behind a wall, you have to take those construction costs into consideration too.
Absolutely, Matthew. I think one of the, essentially, as I was chatting with Dave, where we were ripping out or converting a lot of our rooms a few years ago from projection to display, those were our most expensive rooms. The reality is for us now at this point, when we're doing especially when we're doing retrofit, we're essentially at a point where we're comfortable enough saying, well, what was the room originally designed for? Oftentimes, a room designed for projection versus display might have different lighting layouts or lighting grids considerations. Walls have been reinforced or not. Wiring has been run to the ceiling for projection, or there are conduit paths to get your signal to the projector. The reality is, if the room was originally designed for projection, we're going to keep that room a projector room, and we're just going to make sure we're updated to the last laser, high resolution, high lumen, high brightness system that's possible. But that's really the best way for us to drive down costs, is to what was the room originally designed for, and then stick with that. When you're looking at new construction, on the other hand, that's when there's a little bit more opportunity to design specifically. I think, depending on site conditions, you've got a room like this where, again, no ambient or no windows, no ambient light considerations. Projection works really great. This is a 140-inch diagonal 21:9 aspect. This is a very large room, so projection makes a lot of sense. Another example of a large room where projection also makes sense. We're seeing a lot more rooms with interesting architectural elements, like your entire front wall is glazing or made out of glass. This is a cool product. Again, we talked about Daylight. This is their Sightline series, where the screen practically looks like it's floating. It's got kind of a pretty neat element to the space as well. Again, this would have been a very interesting or difficult installation for traditional displays, whether you would have, a ceiling mount or something display, or maybe a credenza in the front of a room, which are all possible. But when the room's not in use, the screen goes up and you got views of beautiful Seattle, Washington in the background here.